Thank you. Welcome, everybody, to the February program of Agenda Alexandria. I am Rod Cookrow. I'm the chairman this year. And our program tonight is on small business. And before I turn it over to our moderator, Beth Seltzer, I want to just say a couple things. One is I want to recognize some of our newer members, in particular the West End Business Association, which became a sustaining member this month. I want to recognize Arthur Peabody, who's a longtime member of Agenda Alexandria, also a sustaining member, but also a former member of the school board. Arthur, thank you for being here. Also in our audience tonight is one of my favorite former city council members, Lonnie Rich. Lonnie Rich was ahead of his time in some ways because before he ran for council, he started a group called Project New Course, which was about looking at issues like this with a new set of eyes, without taking a position, just kind of looking at issues. And I think that stimulated a lot of involvement in politics for younger people in the city. And to this date, a lot of these younger people are now members of boards and commissions, maybe members of council, but that's because of Lonnie Rich. So let's give Lonnie a hand for that. I might have mentioned this last month, but it still stays with me. One of the founding members of Agenda Alexandria was a guy named George Para, who was a Presbyterian minister. Or was he Episcopal, Gail? I'm sorry. Thank you, I got it right the first time. But he was a founding member, and after a long, long career of service to the community and service to his church and his flock, he passed away about 2 months ago. And George was a standout for Agenda Alexandria, and we are sorry to have lost him. Anyway, tonight, if you have one of these, please just mute it. Our program tonight will be very interesting. I'll let our moderator, Beth, tell you about it. But next month, our meeting will not be here. It will be at the Lyceum in Old Town. And that program will be about the city's budget, not about the city budget that will be released tomorrow by the city manager, but about the budget process generally and how the sausage gets made. How in the 2 months between when the budget's presented and the council approves it, what are the checks and balances and the needs and desires of citizens and interest groups on the budget. And we already have, the panel's not entirely set, but we already have two great former members of council, David Speck and Frank Fannin. And Frank is here tonight too. Frank. Frank is also a former board member of Agenda Alexandria, also a former chairman. Thanks for being here, Frank. Anyway, so those are my announcements, and I hope you'll enjoy this. I think it's going to be very interesting because the small business situation in Alexandria right now is not just fluid. It's, in some people's eyes, it's a catastrophe. Virginia, thank you for being here. So I'll turn it over now to you, Beth. Take over. Have a great time. We will. Because the biggest problem for Beth will be reading those, understanding what you're trying to say or ask. So thank you very much. Beth, back to you.
So, just to give you an overview, as you know, this is about small businesses in Alexandria. First, what we'll do is we'll explore just the general landscape of small businesses in Alexandria. We'll go into some resources to help small businesses to date. And then we'll go into some challenges that our current businesses are facing and then address some solutions to address some of these issues for small businesses. I'd like to thank all of my panel members here for coming tonight and participating. I'd like to introduce everyone briefly before we start. At the end here we have Bill Reagan. He is the founder and executive director of the Small Business Development Center that was founded in 1996. Bill retired in January of 2022. And then we have, next to Bill, we have Sinai Giramedin. He's the Economic Recovery Manager at the Alexandria Economic Development Partnership. Next to Sinai, we have Sharon Oliver. She is the founder of Meany and Oliver Companies, a commercial real estate services firm founded in 2004. Next to Sharon, we have Troy Engler. He's an owner and manager of several businesses in Alexandria, including the retail store Patrick's, Restaurant Eve, and the current Hummingbird restaurant. Next to Troy, we have Kevin Harris. He's the owner of Hoop Life, Inc., a basketball service company that offers basketball programs throughout the DMV since around 2006. He is also founder of Alexandria Minority Business Association. So before we go into this program, I'd like to ask some questions of our audience. I'd like to see a show of hands and like to ask you, how many of you either personally own or know someone, either a friend or family member, who own a small business in Alexandria? Raise your hand to show me. So many. Okay, this is a harder question. How many of you either personally have lost or closed, or maybe know a friend, family member who's had to close the business because of the pandemic or issues related to the pandemic? Okay. Just so you know, I come from a family of business owners, and I've been operating a business in Alexandria for 17 years. I know the challenges and the rewards, and I know it's a job that is 7 days a week. So statistically, just to give you an overview, in the United States, 99.9% of all businesses are small businesses. We have approximately 33 million small businesses in the United States. So as you see, small businesses are vital to our economy, both nationally and locally. What is a small business? Well, the SBA has a very defined, rigorous criteria to identify what is a small business, and that's based on certain industry data and revenue. But I'm going to send my first question to Bill to ask him to define how has Alexandria viewed and defined a small business?
The national standards, is this working? Yes. The national standards that you just referenced, Beth, from SBA and from government agencies, and each agency has a different parameter, but generally they're talking about any business that's 100 employees or fewer, and then there's some revenue issues. I don't think, for practical purposes, in the city of Alexandria, if they have 100 employees, they're a pretty big business for us. And our focus at the Small Business Development Center when I was there was on businesses. We never refused service to anyone, regardless of their size, but our focus was on businesses with fewer than 20 employees. And we use that general connotation because that's the size of business where generally it's one or two people are having to make all of the decisions in the business, and they have lack expertise in all of the areas that they need expertise, and that's where a resource like the Small Business Development Center is able to come in and offer connections to very important resources. So for practical purposes, in the city of Alexandria and the Small Business Development Center at least, we considered a small business to be one with fewer than 20 employees.
Okay, and just generally, give us just a brief overview of the type of businesses that we see in Alexandria. Let's go to date. Let's not talk about the future with some changes coming, but generally, I mean, are we looking at tourist-focused businesses, or just give us an overview?
Let me first throw out a statistics that I think would be interesting to you, and that is that 91%, and now mind you, these are stats that I asked city staff to pull, and they were pulled quite a few years ago, but I think they still maintain as viable stats. 91% of the businesses in the city of Alexandria have fewer than 20 employees, and they generate 50% of the city's gross receipts. And we did a comparison at that time. I think you might find this interesting, that the aggregated revenues of those businesses with fewer than 20 employees was 14 times the gross receipts of all of the big box retail in Potomac Yard. And that was from Target at one end all the way down to Shoppers at the other end. And that's when they were all full and still operating at full steam. So I'm saying that to you to realize that this is an important economic engine. Can you imagine saying there's something that's going to open up in town that's 14 times the revenue of the businesses in Potomac Yard, and yet they fit nicely into the nooks and crannies that are in the city of Alexandria. They fit into our spaces. They also are important not only to our economy, but also to the character of Alexandria. I think when you think of Alexandria, when you think particularly of Old Town and of Del Rey, you think of small businesses. That's the connotation. The types of businesses, the predominant sector of businesses in the city is service sector. That's consultants and IT firms and government contractors. That's pretty much all across the country. The service sector is the largest. We're very closely behind that, the retail and hospitality sector. Retail and restaurants are very important in numbers and in character to the city of Alexandria. And then you have personal services and professional services that ripple on down.
Okay, thanks for that answer. Could you tell us a bit about the resources that the Small Business Development Center provides to businesses? And I think when we talked, you mentioned it's not really money, it's other aspects.
We don't give money, but we, I see Walter out there, and I can't see everybody, but we help businesses connect to money. One of the things we do, and this is a parameter that we don't get measured on, I keep saying we, I'm not there anymore, but it's hard to admit that. When I was there, we don't get measured on businesses that don't go into business because we work with them and decide that they don't have a viable operation, or help them come to the grips with that. That's an important characteristic, is helping an entrepreneur ready to start their business decide, I may not have a viable concept. I don't know my competition, and I may not have a unique value that can make me outdo what my competition can do. So that's one of the things we do, is help people realize that they shouldn't maybe invest a lot of time and effort into something if it's not viable. We help them put together business plans, and we help them connect to lenders. Our retired banker is our business analyst. He's a retired banker, and he works with businesses meticulously on their business plans and helps them put together viable business plans that they carry to a banker. And when they walk into the banker, they are ready to answer the questions that a banker is going to ask. So with that business analyst assistance, we've facilitated over $98 million in funding to businesses over the period of time that I was there from Alexandria banks. We also connect them to resources such as attorneys and accountants and human resources consultants, a social media website, people who can give them advice on websites. Everywhere that a business owner might have lacked expertise, we had an area where we could pull in an expert to help them make those connections. We also introduced them to business associations, to the chamber, and to the city government, and different parts of the city government to help them flow through the permitting processes or any of the issues that came up with the city. So we tried to connect with them on the issues that were flaring up in their business to help them sail through those and spend less time on those and more time on their core business.
Okay. So the Small Business Development Center, it folded into your organization, Sinai, the Alexandria Economic Development Partnership, and I learned today around 2010. Mm-hmm. So Sinai, tell us generally about what resources AEDP provides directly to the small businesses, and I don't have a sense for if you provide them through the SBDC or if that's separate.
Right. Thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you for Agenda Alexandria for inviting AEDP and me to talk to you all this evening. So as Bill mentioned, the direct work that AEDP offers to small businesses in Alexandria is mostly done through the SBDC. And so through the SBDC services, all the things that Bill had talked about are things that we at AEDP consider overall as something that we offer to small businesses directly. But in addition to the capacity building services that small businesses in Alexandria have access to through SBDC, AEDP has also given direct grants to small businesses. And so in the past couple of years, we've given four grants, close to $6.5 million to small businesses, to around 667 small businesses in Alexandria. Majority of that funding came from ARPA and CARES Act, so it was in response to the pandemic. So it allowed for small businesses in Alexandria to improve their technology, pay for rent and mortgage, and grow or improve their business services or their requirements.
So are you a branch of the Alexandria government when the CARES Act went to the government and then through you to?
That's maybe talk about a little bit about who AEDP is.
Right.
Right. So the Alexandria Economic Development Partnership is a 501c6 nonprofit. We're a public-private partner of the city. So we're independent from the city, but as a nonprofit, work closely with the city to push for economic growth, business development. And so we're taxed with many different responsibilities, but independently working from the city, but a close partner.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So in addition to these two resources for small businesses, as Bill noted, businesses around the city have created their own geographically defined business associations. We have the Alexandria Chililagua Business Association, Delray Business Association, Old Town Business and Professional Association, Carlisle Community Council, the Eisenhower Partnership, and the West End Business Association. Kevin here is representing the Minority Business Association of Alexandria, but I'll get to you later because right now I'm talking about these geographic ones. And so Bill and I discussed that, well, there's also the Alexandria Chamber of Commerce as a resource for small businesses. But during our discussions, Bill, you noted that the SBDC can't lobby on behalf of businesses to the city government. However, these business associations, geographically defined, can, and so can the Alexandria Chamber of Commerce. And so for those small businesses here or anywhere in the city who have concerns and they want the city to hear them, what do you suggest?
Well, yes, the founding legislation that established the Small Business Development Center program nationally prohibited us from lobbying. And we were a 501c3, and that you're not supposed to lobby. The Chamber of Commerce is the voice of business in the city of Alexandria. In addition to that, the business associations, and we encourage the businesses to get active with that business association as well as with the civic association in the part of town where they're located. One, you learn a lot of things from those other businesses that are a part of the association. The issues that are bothering a business are likely bothering more than one business. They're bothering several other businesses. And when you get a momentum like that, that association can highlight and bring those issues to the attention of city council members. Our city council is very approachable in this city. Our city management is very approachable. So very active business associations. We have representatives here tonight from many of the business associations that are really, really engaged and really active. If a business is not active with their business association, they're missing out on a resource that they can talk to and get feedback on, like, here's how we can help solve those problems. And that business association can carry that issue forward, and they can work with the Chamber of Commerce, which is a citywide business association, to lobby on behalf of issues. And they've done that over the years on a number of different issues that were festering to small businesses.
If you don't mind, just to add a few things on.
Okay.
So as part of our investment within AEDP, directly I'd mentioned the grants that we offer to small businesses, but indirectly, AEDP through the city has also invested in business associations. So we've given out grants to 8 business associations in Alexandria, investing close to over $500,000, establishing a couple of business associations. So like you mentioned, Kevin Harris is a founding leader, director of the Alexandria Minority Business Association. But in addition to his, we also have Pastor Lou in the room, so the Social Responsibility Group. Those would be the main 2 business associations focused on supporting minority-owned business associations. The WEBA, the West End Business Association with Marianne, minority-led institution. It's also another grantee recipient. So indirectly, to support small businesses, like Bill mentioned, we're trying to strengthen business associations in Alexandria that uplift the voices and the demands of businesses, small businesses.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to go now, transition a bit to the challenges facing small businesses in Alexandria. Just a general overview that it is tough to run a small business. The Bureau of Labor Statistics has notes that 20% of small businesses fail within the first year. By the end of the second year, it's 30%. By the end of the fifth year, it's about half. And then by the end of a decade, it's 70%. It's a very high failure rate. It's a tough go at it. So I want to hear from our small business owners, both Troy and Kevin. Take out the pandemic at this point for this question, and just generally tell me and tell the audience, what are some challenges, or what are your top challenges that you feel you face as business owners in Alexandria? And please share them all.
There are many. My name is Troy Englert, and I didn't know Bill Regan back in the day. I wish I did, because as a small business owner, you get a great idea. You write your business plan, you go to the bank, and they say, yeah, right. and now you got to come up with the funds to implement it. And if you don't have a bank or extremely wealthy, how do you do that? And I spent way too much time trying to do that. I didn't know Bill. And once you overcome that issue, then you got to find a space to put this wonderful business in. I was very lucky. I had a small store in Old Town at St. Asaph Street and was able to work with the landlord to help us get going. Even in a recession that started in 2007 when our business opened. So the current problems of the city is a new startup small business to get the rents that are being asked for right now. I don't think I could start a new business in Old Town right now, especially in retail, which is what Patrick's was. Fine linen home decor store. We did interior design as well. The amount of capital it takes to invest to start a small business isn't just $20,000, $30,000. I know I took my 401k, cashed it in, $150,000. I was very fortunate. I had a great job before I opened my businesses. But I put it all on the line, and every business owner in this city has done that. To start a business, they put their blood, sweat, equity, and tears into owning a business. And it's sad to see what's happening to some of our great friends that are losing their business.
So Kevin, do you have?
Yes, definitely. Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
All right, excellent. So I was gonna definitely I echo what he's saying in terms of access to capital. I think that's always a challenge for any small business owner, no matter where you are, especially in a place like Alexandria where it is expensive to be able to run, especially if you're trying to run something that's brick and mortar. And then also I was gonna say, I think having the ability to be able to influence the policies that are affecting your business on a daily basis.
Like, give me an
Yeah,
example.
so I was going to say, just in terms of some of the regulations and rules and some of the things that you may face, particularly sometimes I know for me, like as a contractor, when I was a contractor, well, still am, with the recreation department, and the percentage changed, you know, and so you feeling like, well, how do I, you know, speak against this, you know, and although I know that there are a ton of, like what Sanai and Bill had just spoke about in terms of having a lot of different business associations who can lobby on your behalf, I think it's a matter of connecting with those. I think especially as a minority business owner, just trying to build those relationships and figure out what that looks like. I think also in terms of, for some businesses, even and still with those associations, sometimes there's a barrier in terms of maybe the fees, depending on where you start off at, you know, whether or not, because again, you're trying to, especially when you're first starting, you're trying to figure out every dollar counts. And so it's just a matter of trying to figure out how you're gonna work that situation out and whether or not you can afford to, or whether it's really worth it, to be able to do that. And especially sometimes when you're an owner operator, I think even spending the time to be able to go to some of these meetings and do things like
Right.
that, because you're so busy working your business
Right.
that sometimes it's hard to be able to work on it. You know what I mean? And so, those are some of the main things that I see. So
Right, so you're doing the marketing and changing the tape in the.
there you go.
in
There you
like the
go.
typewriter or
There you go.
whatever.
You washing the windows.
Yeah,
Everything.
exactly.
You're the janitor and everything
Right,
else.
exactly.
And one of my biggest frustrations when I started with the city was I opened my store April 13th. And the joke is, it was Friday the 13th. We had a great day on Saturday, and April 15th, we went out of business because we had to pay all the taxes. But that was a joke for years at our store. But for 6 months, I did not have a sign above my door. And it was a beyond difficult, maddening battle with the city to get the sign on our door. I understand it's gotten better, but I can tell you that was the most ludicrous, frustrating, nobody knew we were there. And if you're talking about every dollar that counts without even having a name up on the door, we could have just as well went out of business as made it because of that. And that's where the city, whatever it takes, if you got a new business, they got a great idea, and they're gonna come to the city, we should be helping that individual, not tearing them down.
So, Bill and Sinai, I'm sure you guys probably get an earful, perhaps, or you did, of people coming and saying, but I'm trying to do this, I'm trying to do this, what do I need to do this? Can you tell me from your perspective, what is your collection of problems that you see facing small businesses?
Sure. So the things that both Troy and Kevin mentioned are things that we focus on. These are challenges that we hear often. So challenges around the ecosystem, on how to start a business, how to see if you're in good standing for your taxes. And these are ecosystem initiatives that the city needs to improve. And so we're working with the city for recommendations on how that can be improved. But then looking at some of the other aspects of the challenges that they mentioned. So access to capital is always a challenge. And part of that challenge is first knowing the roadmap. So to Bill's point about how do you build the relationships with bankers locally that you could speak to or get feedback on your application. And other times it's not knowing the right people to speak to, right? So not having access to the right network. And then the third is capacity building. We do a great job through the work that Bill had done to build the SPDC, to have technical assistance services to small businesses. We could do a better job, so we're working to make sure that we can improve on the resources and tools that we have, and also have them be accessible to residents in the city. So have them be linguistically and culturally appropriate to the folks that have open businesses or are looking to open businesses in Alexandria. And then the access to capital, in addition to giving out grants, we're looking to make sure that it's easier for folks to understand available financing both in the city and in the region, and be the liaison between the small business owners looking to get access to the capital, and having someone within our office that can help to navigate it. So we're building resources in order to respond to some of these concerns within our office, but it's a moving process and it's a growing process. And funding is always a challenge, but wherever we could find it, we want to make sure that we're using it in a way that responds to the challenges that small businesses have in Alexandria.
One of the things I would like to challenge the city and your organization is that small businesses that are doing, let me back up before COVID, that were doing well before COVID are in a cash-strapped situation, and we're losing these dear businesses. If they were successful before and they had a good business plan, a lot of times because of the COVID and because of, they paid every bill, they don't have credit. So for those businesses that were successful or on the edge, if there was some type of a grant situation or a program that would be able to give those businesses a little bit of a equity line of credit that would be backed either by a bond or by the city, so that they could get back on their feet. I know that's a challenge. We're experiencing it ourselves. Right. And every business owner I've talked with in the last 6 months, that we made it through the pandemic, supply chain's not getting better, and these are our capital issues. And that's where the government, in my opinion, besides the new businesses, for those that were successful, to keep them going.
Right. So there was an attempt to do that through the ARPA funding that was allocated to back to business, 2 rounds of grants that have gone out, the all-weather grant. So those were initiatives intended for that exact purpose. But maybe if that is a continual issue, it would be really wonderful to hear your feedback on how we could make progress again.
I think there's a couple of synopses with bonds with enterprise zones.
Right.
Where you can target those type of businesses.
I'll touch upon the enterprise zone at the end. It is a topic that I hope we can get to, so, Bill, do you have anything, in hearing all of the concerns?
Kevin really highlighted a key element of small business ownership, and I mentioned earlier that it's 1 or 2 people having to do everything, make all of the decisions. They don't have the luxury of a legal department and a marketing team, and it's that 1 or 2 people having to do it all. And so they are overwhelmed, absolutely overwhelmed. And that means that any of us delivering resources to those small business owners have to appreciate that and realize that they may or may not hear everything you're saying or have sent us to them to say, we need you to do this input or we need you to fill out this form. You have to constantly remind them and clarify it and simplify it. And we, at the Small Business Development Center, we put a lot of effort into making everything succinct that we set out that required the least amount of effort to return back to us. So applications and for anything, grants or anything else, the more simple you can make those, and it is so beneficial to a small business owner. So that's a key issue.
Yep.
Yeah, and I was going to say that, that's one of the things, like this is a great point that you're bringing up in terms of having access to information. I think that's so important, particularly, I know
we talked about how the Alexandria City website is amazing,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
But no one knows what's there because I don't know how. You could sit all day and read it.
Absolutely.
And it's very helpful.
Yeah,
If you read it.
Yeah.
If you know how to read
you
it.
need a little GPS to get through there, but
Yeah.
it's okay. Yeah.
Small business owners don't have the time
Yeah.
to do all of the delving and searching. We need to lay it out for them as crisply as we possibly can. I just want to call attention very quickly to, even if a business owner is not coming to the Small Business Development Center, go to the Alexandria Small Business Development Center website. Under the startup section, there is a startup checklist. And that startup checklist is a drop-down with detailed information. It talks about licensing and zoning and permitting and the things that you need to find out. And if you came in and met with someone at the Small Business Development Center, when you're at the formative stage of that business, they will tell you what permits you're likely going to have to deal with in terms of signage and any other operations and what will have to go before council and such, so that you are aware and your timeline will be more succinct. But the checklist on the website for the Alexandria Small Business Development Center is key, and you can get to that website by just Googling Alexandria Small Business, and that website comes up at the top of that search.
And I was just going to add to that really quick. That's one of the things too. I was going to say that issue is something that's always an issue, like small business wide, like everyone, but it's amplified even more sometimes if you're from like a marginalized community. I think that it's one of those things in terms of just being organized in that fashion and being attached to some of those other organizations. I know in our city, one of the things that we've been growing is metrics in terms of understanding and being able to identify certain small businesses and who the owner is and those sort of things to be able to reach out to those communities. So, so I just wanted to highlight that. I think that's important to understand because that's one of the reasons why, I know we'll get into the Minority Business Association, but that's one of the reasons why we got it started. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So one of the biggest challenges was and still is the pandemic. It hit internationally, nationally, locally, and it devastated small businesses, it devastated businesses, it's still devastating many. So really briefly, I mean, this is probably a no-brainer, but here, what was the biggest challenge faced to small businesses because of the pandemic, especially if you have a physical retail location?
Oh, my goodness.
So the biggest challenge, I think, for retailers were that everybody went home. And so there were no customers. You know, offices were closed for a really long time. Not sure what that was.
All good
Offices-
points, all good
offices-
points.
Offices were closed.
Ding, ding.
Yeah, okay, so offices were closed, nobody was going to hotels. Everybody was staying home in their condos, apartments, houses, whatever it was, and retailers bore the brunt of all of that was going on. So, you know, you really had this, you know, huge implosion on retail of what happened. And without customers, I think this is an ongoing issue, and it's going to be an ongoing issue for a while. It's not something that happened overnight. It's not going to get fixed overnight. I mean, the biggest challenge for not only Alexandria, but the surrounding areas and downtown is how do you bring people back into the city? How do you get people back into offices? How do you get customers back to the restaurants and the retailers that are in that area? And how do you make it vibrant again? Because I think that's the goal for everybody. You know, you want a vibrant city. Alexandria is a wonderful place to be when there's people here, but when it feels like no one's there, it feels a little scary. So that's been a challenge for everybody, and we're beginning to see some of the areas really try to implement policies that are bringing people back in. One of the fallouts is if somebody isn't using office space, what do you do with all that vacant office space?
Well, so Sharon, I want to go into detail with you about the situation with let's go to the 100-foot level, the commercial office space. Explain the relevance of that to this level, to the retail level, and explain what happened as a result of the pandemic, explain how bad it is, and then explain what's happening at the retail level.
So, in the office market,
Thank you.
offices were closed, 100% closed for a very long period of time. I mean, many of the people that were affected thought, we're going to go home and in a weekend we're going to be back, or in 2 months we're going to be back, and it ended up being, in excess of a year. Most of my clients that are in the office, in office-type businesses, have downsized as much as 50 to 75%. So what you've seen is people that used to be in a building and say they had a floor, they only need like 10% of that floor now to house their people. The employees are not wanting to come back. And, I think a lot of people think, oh, well, everybody's going to be back at work someday. I don't think so. The problem is that it's been proven now that you can work at home. Okay, everybody can work remotely. It was kind of like this major experiment, and it worked. And so younger people don't want to go back to the office, and the managers want them back at the office. And so there's the yin and the yang of that going on. And, somewhere it'll fall out in the middle. But the downside is that office space will probably be 25% or 30% utilized versus what it was before.
Well, so
So that drifts down to nobody's here, okay? Nobody's walking up, and the lunch business that people rely on and that depend on people to be at the office to come to lunch isn't there. The people aren't there.
I had asked you on the phone whether or not, do you think in like 2 to 3 years, businesses and employees are just going to say, enough of this, we're going back to the office?
I think what's going to happen is we're going to be back to a 3-day work week probably, and that'll be maybe the standard, and maybe we'll get to 4, and we're never going to be at a 5-day.
But so explain what that does to the commercial space.
So when you're only there 3 days a week, you don't need all the space that you needed. I have a small business, so I really understand the whole implication of all of this. And so the problem has been that you have to pivot and you have to figure out how to make it work in another way, and maybe it isn't the way that you used to do it. And so what our office leasing became, how do we make offices relevant again, and how do you convert office buildings to something that's meaningful in the city? And in Alexandria, we've done a lot of that. We've sold some office buildings for conversions to condos. We've sold an office building for conversion to apartments. We've sold office buildings for Alexandria City Public Schools to utilize and transition into schools. And we've had to think outside the box. And I think this is going to force everybody to think outside the box. How do you make it work?
This is a small caveat. Everybody's interested in Alexandria. Just briefly say, where were those buildings that went to the schools?
They were in Alexandria.
Yeah, but where?
They were at March Center.
Mark Center, okay,
Okay, so West End.
okay.
So, you know, just looking at the big picture, sort of at the 30,000-foot level, you say, okay, how do you bring people back? And if you assume that people aren't going to be 100% back, how do you change your thinking about what your delivery is? How does a restaurant do something different?
And that's exactly, your point is perfectly said, because a lot of times, like I'm part owner of Hummingbird here in Old Town at the bottom of Duke Street. It's a fabulous restaurant. And a lot of times, without that business person going down there to have
Right.
lunch, that affects whether you're profitable or not profitable. And then how long is it going to take to get those people back in the seat to make a profit? And if, you can only do it for so long without something changing.
So Sharon, when you talked to me on the phone, I really got a chill when you said something to me. I'm sorry, it was a bit disturbing in that I want you to tell me what is the potential for, I mean, you have all these commercial landlords with these spaces that are empty. Can they sustain that?
So what we're beginning to see is sort of the fallout of that. Landlords have held on for a long time, and I know as small businesses, we all feel like, oh, the landlord is the one that has to really try to work to make it work, and they do, and they have during the beginning of the pandemic. But now they're all at the tipping point of can they hold on to their projects, and we're beginning to see buildings be given back to banks and insurance companies, people, all the lenders, and that causes a whole other set of issues. And then, you're going to begin to see valuations decline on office buildings in general. And I think we're seeing that today.
And then how does that impact the retail level?
And on the retail level, everything just, like I said right from the beginning, it just trickles down. I mean, if you have a problem in the office level, you have a problem on the retail level. I will say the bright spot in the whole thing is multifamily. As you see more multifamily getting done and we see some office conversions occurring, you'll see more people coming back into the city, and that will begin to affect and help retailers support themselves. So that's a question of timing, and we're all looking at it still as there's still a couple more years probably of real pain before we get to that point where those people are coming back and the new conversions are opening.
And that brings me to Cy, where for those businesses that are currently operating well in the city, we need that bridge gap to make it.
So,
As part of our investment, just to add on to what you're saying, is so the reason why we've worked with business associations, support both existing and new business associations, is to push for economic activity. And so the way we want to combat this, what Sharon was sharing, the loss in retail space or office space, is how do we make sure that there's business activation in those areas to bring in either tourists or regional residents to come to Alexandria to take advantage of the businesses here. And just to mention, I mean, over the past 10 years, we've seen a population increase within Alexandria. That only means that we have residents who've chosen to live here that are going to continue to help us have more residents who will take advantage of the small businesses in Alexandria. So that could be the two focus we take, I guess.
this is the last of the problems that we'll address, and then I hope to move on to solutions. So there's a lot of discussion about the impact that real estate investment trusts may have on values of properties in Alexandria. REITs, there's a particular REIT that owns many properties in Alexandria, up to 20, and they're quite well-funded and can afford higher rents or requesting higher rents, and this may impact other business owners. Troy, I know this is something you wanted to talk about, and then Sharon, I'm going to ask you to weigh in.
Sharon and I had a conversation before tonight's meeting, and we both hit on the same thing, is that the REITs are a way for the general layperson to invest into these large building complexes. But the formula for that is predicated off the value of the building. So the first level or the second level of these large complexes, they base the revenue of that small business meeting certain goals. And right now, especially during COVID, but going forward, that expectation is going to change because retail has forever changed with the Amazons, the online buying, and COVID. It is fundamentally changed, and those revenue dollars are not going to get to the level that they have predicted their buildings to generate revenue from, and therefore their buildings are not at the level of pricing that they need it to be, and that's why they're in trouble. REITs are in real trouble, some of them. And I know.
So that would bring rents down then?
No, not right now.
Not necessarily.
No, not now, but,
They can't reduce the rent. And what a lot of people are doing right now are doing pop-up stores to exacerbate the short-term problem. The problem isn't going away, and they're trying to come up with another solution to make that revenue number work for that building. But a store like mine, and the one that comes to mind is the wonderful theater. Patrick's looked at going in there. There was another building that was on the corner of Route 1 going into the city that was vacant for years. And we tried to do a purchase of those buildings, but we couldn't because the rents that they required, the banks required, it was just not feasible for any small business to go in. That's why they sat there empty for years. And then the building deteriorates and it looks bad and it gives a negative feel to the city. So I know we want to get to some solutions. There's got to be some ordinances to make sure these buildings look great. And they don't right now.
Sharon, do you have anything to add? Or?
Well, I don't think it's only REITs. So landlords in general have a problem. And so, often the problem is on the supply side and we're oversupplied. Today, the problem is on the demand side, okay? And there's no demand. So the landlords are having as hard a time trying to figure out how to solve this problem as the businesses are having, because the problem is the businesses don't need the space. And so the landlords are in a position where they can't afford to keep giving concessions to people because they have to pay their mortgage to the bank. And it's a really hard conundrum to be in.
It's a vicious cycle.
I don't think the landlords cannot solve this problem. That's really the issue.
Okay, we're going to move on to some solutions. So, Sinai, I'm going to start with you. You brought a ray of hope to me when I talked to you about what's coming with the Virginia Tech campus, Amazon landmark area, the opening of the Potomac Yard. Just tell us generally what you think, how that will help the current businesses, and then what do you foresee as new business opportunities in Alexandria resulting from that?
Right, so thank you for the question. All these new developments that are coming into our city are, in one part, can help to raise, to my point earlier, the residents who live in the city. So both Amazon, even though it's not within Alexandria, it being across from us, basically across the street from us, with the headquarters opening up there, we expect a large number of folks moving to this area. But with the Amazon headquarters moving to National Landing, there was an opportunity for AEDP to engage in bringing in an expansion of the opening of the Virginia Tech Innovation Campus in Potomac Yards. And that innovation campus that will open in the fall of 2024 as a graduate level program that probably would have annually about 1,000 graduates. The intention for that campus is to connect entrepreneurs or graduate level students or postgraduate fellows to come in, explore ideas, use the lab, and start their business in Alexandria. And so with the innovation campus located within our city, that means new technology-focused, high-growth small businesses opening or starting in our city, and hiring folks who are part of their school system or in our general area. So that's exciting for the city to bring in that level of capacity, but also to grow small businesses and have opportunity for existing and new businesses to start and serve those who are coming in through Virginia Tech Innovation Campus. The landmark, the initiative, it's a large initiative. The mall has been taken down, and so the role that AEDP played in that development is through our IDA, the Industrial Development Authority. My colleague Win, who's in the room, can speak to that a lot more than me. It was an innovative financial tool that we've used to create that opportunity in the West End. And that development would not only bring the new hospital campus for Inova and a cancer treatment center, but it also had within that development mixed use and small business retail space, so additional space available to businesses in Alexandria to help grow again and expand their services here. And so these growth opportunities first increase the population within our city, bring in top talent, but also allow us to start new businesses that would help for small business growth.
Thank you. So I see a question came in, and I already had anticipated this issue, but we have a lot of development going on. And the development is causing some displacement of residents, and also it's causing displacement of businesses that currently have leases in buildings or areas that are being redeveloped. We have one area, the Madison Street area, that is about to be completely redeveloped, and many businesses are in this area, longtime businesses with current leases. By the sale of their properties, they will be displaced. They will have a new developer or a new commercial development there. So what can the owner of the building or the properties who are selling those properties, what can they do to help the businesses who are being displaced or moved, or maybe just going out of business? And what can the newly acquired owner of that area or developer do to assist? This is for you, Sharon. Both
She looked
ends,
away.
the seller.
Did you-
I was looking to see if you were going to say anything. No, I'm good. It's your question.
I got it. So we just went through this. We were the broker that sold 1101 King Street that was owned partially by Southern Management, and then it had 7 other condominium owners on the first floor, small businesses that were in that building, and a couple of retail-type tenants. And when we put together the sale, we were engaged by American Real Estate Partners, who was the buyer of the building, to represent them and work with all of the people that were in the building to help transition everybody, so that there were some condominiums that needed to be acquired by American Real Estate Partners, and there were some leases that needed to be canceled and help those people relocate. The upside of this was that the office market was really much less costly than most of these tenants were paying. So the office tenants were pretty easy to move out, and the retailers, we were successful in helping everybody. I mean, I think it's kind of incumbent on the new buyer that takes over these locations to help those people try to figure out where they're going to go. Either have them engage a broker that knows the market that can really help them, or in some cases, there may have to be incentives to get them out. I mean, you have to look at how long is left on the lease. I mean, I'm not, the details of those Madison leases,
exactly.
I don't know. And I know they've all been in the market and they've all been looking for spaces, but there's something about you're the buyer and you need to be able to make this happen. So you need to have to help those people figure out where they're going to go and how they can afford to do it. They can't, it isn't like a bailout. They can't just all of a sudden, here's everything and you get it done. But the new landlord has to help them, the new developer. So
Okay.
I would think that, I think Carr's the developer there, that they would be working with those groups to try to figure out how to get them relocated in a timely manner. Certainly it was incumbent on us at 1101 King Street to make everything come together so that the timing worked, to be able to start the development there, to turn that office project into apartments. So, there's a goal that developer has that they need to meet, and they need to get the groups relocated in order to meet that.
Thank you. Okay, I'm moving back to the issue of grants, which is a solution. So now you went over the general discussion of grants, that your organization provides grants. Bill, you were integral in creating or working with the Queen Street grant, and there's 2 grants that focused on minority businesses, I believe. There's the Queen Street grant and the BPOC grant. Generally discuss what these grants were, and then, just explain what they were and the status.
Talk about the police.
I was not engaged in the Queen Street grant. What I did is I worked with Pastor Lou Whiting to try to get started the Queen Street Business Association.
Okay,
So
sorry, okay.
Mine was not the grant portion of it, but
okay,
so I'll
okay.
defer to Sinai.
Right, okay. So the Queen Street corridor grant was in response to what we'd learned when we had done the Back to Business and Back to Business all-weather grant. And what we learned is that many of the minority business minority business owners were not aware of some of the city-led activities, or at least grants that were being given out. So we wanted to do a better job of engaging and raising the awareness of this opportunity. And so we worked with Pastor Lou, Small Business Development Center. We canvassed in that community to let folks know of what this opportunity was and how they could apply for it. We also wanted to make sure that it was simplified so they could easily complete the application and get the funding that they deserved. And the funding didn't come from ARPA or CARES Act, but it was an investment through the city, through the Braddock Metro neighborhood development area. And so we used that funding to give out 19 small businesses up to $5,000 for their business through the Queen Street corridor grant. The BIPOC Small Businesses Grant was led by the city. So it was not an initiative of AEDP or SBDC, but we offered support to the city as they worked to develop that initiative. But unfortunately, it was found to be illegal, and I know that the city has settled with they've settled the lawsuit. And so the hope is, I know there's commitment to continue supporting minority business owners or entrepreneurs in the city. We, through SBDC and the services that we offer at AEDP, would like to continue to support the city, but it's not an initiative that we led, but
Okay.
one that we were involved in.
Okay, so then, my understanding is it was $500,000. And
Right.
so, Kevin, you and I
Sorry,
talked.
it wasn't, sorry.
I'm
This is a correction. So it's $250,000 that were allocated for the grants purposes through BIPOC. The remaining 200 were other incubator services that were intended for. But overall, the budget through the city was $500,000. But the grants that were created through the BIPOC Small Business Grant, again, it didn't go through. So, but that was
Right, I'm just trying to,
Right.
so there's money there, but,
Right,
so,
right.
Kevin, you and I talked about this, and, so the city had basically settled, and, they made a statement, it's in violation of the 14th Amendment, I guess that was part of the settlement, and then you and I talked, and you had specific thoughts on the purpose of the grant, and share your thoughts on that.
Yes, definitely. I think that, well, naturally, the whole purpose of the grant initially and even to this day now it's canceled, but the purpose behind it was to be able to invest in these BIPOC businesses for their growth and sustainability. Particularly, it prioritized those organizations who were left out of, who didn't get a chance to get access to the ARPA funding that the AEDP put out initially when they did a grant. The city had done a study and realized that a lot of minority businesses were left out. And so they wanted to create this BIPOC business grant to be able to support those individuals in that community in particular. It's unfortunate that it became a political thing and it got sidetracked. And when you think about those things, it's still a sad situation because these businesses, again, one of the things that everyone here has highlighted is about the impact of COVID-19 and how that there is a need for investment into businesses, regardless of whether or not you're a BIPOC business owner or just some other race. But in particular, when you realize that these individuals didn't get access to that, so you can only imagine how much more of an impact that may have had on their businesses. Now, again, it's one of those things that you have to understand that this really is an investment. It's not like these are businesses, none of these businesses are like about to go out of business tomorrow. These are resilient individuals who've really fought to keep their doors open and who have demonstrated sustainability. But obviously, anytime you're a business owner, investments help. You know, it helps you grow, and it's one of those things that not only does it help you, but it also helps our local economy, because you have to understand that their growth equates to the growth of our local economy. One of the things that I know, even from Visit Alexandria, one of their emphasis this year is to be able to attract, and they wanted to highlight minority business owners in terms of attracting tourism from people of color and other nationalities and all these things. And you know, when you think about some of the businesses that were going to be able to have access to those things, those were the type of businesses that would attract those and help Visit Alexandria meet those type of goals in terms of tourism and things like that. And so, you know, it's just unfortunate sometimes when things become political, you know, you kind of lose track of the people that it's really affecting, you know.
Well, so there's currently, this money that was allocated to this is there. And
Yes.
so what does the Minority Business Association of Alexandria see as some viable options for use of this money?
Well, we still see it as we have to figure out a way to be able to invest, you know, these viable, to use the funds, you know, and actually invest in those businesses, whether it be, you know, there's been multiple things thrown out, incubation programs, other things that kind of support those businesses' sustainability and growth in terms of just being able to support their daily operations. And so, I mean, that's the most important thing, that whatever program that arises, you know, in response to what is currently taking place, that it still finds its way to still be able to invest in those organizations. And that's kind of our priority, and that's the thing that we are lobbying for, yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
I would like to move on to the topic of bid. And so Sinai, explain to us generally what a bid is. And within Alexandria right now, the bid, it's called BISD, the Business Investment Service District, is being proposed. Explain its geographic coverage, how it is going to come to fruition if it does, how the money's collected, how it's going, the city's going to budget for that, and how about it?
Right, okay, thank you. So bids are the business improvement districts. In general, so not the BISD specific to Old Town, but bids in general are a mechanism for economic activity that business owners or property owners could collectively, if agreed on, could ask the city or could ask city county administration to tax them to generate some revenue that would allow them to direct services in their geographic area. Typically, they're used to supplement existing services offered by a city. And it's voluntary, meaning that you need a supermajority of property owners to agree within that district in order for that district to be taxed, in addition to what they're already being taxed by the city or whatever jurisdiction that they're in. The Old Town Business Improvement Service District, or is an initiative that's begun recently, and it's led by the Old Town Business Association, or Old Town Business, excuse me. And so if you wanted to learn more about it, I would strongly encourage you to visit Old Town Business, BISD, .org, and it covers exactly what the intended use of this business will be. And just to share a little bit about what their intended services will be, and then their focus mainly is in driving business activity within that district. And so they're looking at the waterfront in Old Town Alexandria all the way to the metro stop. And so the businesses that you see are the properties on that strip in Alexandria, King Street. On King Street will be the main members of the Business Improvement Service District in Old Town, and then a block east and west for the most part. But if you wanted to see exactly which locations it covers, I encourage you to go to Old Town Businesses, BISD.com, to learn about what they cover and what the geographic area is. They have 5 main initiatives that they're wishing to cover through this initiative, through the BISD. And those are events, so event planning, again, the intention being, in addition to the existing events, how do we grow the kinds of events that we're hosting with the idea that you would attract more folks to come in that business district and take advantage of the businesses in that area. And again, the mission being to drive economic growth or development or activity. The other is around marketing. How do we make sure that, in addition to the marketing being done by the city through Visit Alexandria and others, that we target the businesses in that district and generate enough marketing and awareness of what they offer and who they are. The third is an ambassador program, and this is to hire individuals who could be stewards of the local area, be ambassadors to any visitor. And the fourth is around business support, supporting businesses to some of the issues that both Kevin and Troy had raised around engaging the city. And lastly, they've also budgeted for advocacy to push for change within the city. It's voluntary, so the property owners in that area, supermajority, if they decide that this is an activity that they would like to invest in, then they could choose and invest in it. To us at AEDP, the way we look at it is it's another tool in capacity building.
So to have this pass, though, I think you have to have, is it, so there's a petition going around, and you need 60%? 60%. And that, I heard the number 300 the other night at one of the meetings.
Right.
Somebody's asking me here, who's counting the votes?
It's the city. So it's the city that's
Okay.
enforcing these laws, and so
Okay.
60% of the property owners that the city identifies in that area would be the decision makers.
Okay, so I definitely want to hear from Kevin and Troy about what you think of this plan. I think, Troy, are you in this zone?
I believe so.
I think so, yes, okay. This is a redo plan of what was tried several years, about 5-6 years ago in Old Town.
It's
7 or 8, it's been that
2017.
long?
It's been altered a bit, so it doesn't cover as much of the geographic area. And I would urge for anybody who has questions to reach out to the Old Town businesses, but sorry.
I think one of the big things that we discussed here is how tight the small businesses are. And I look at this as just another tax on the small businesses. If you get the 60%, those 40% that voted no on that, they voted no for a reason. There is nothing that I would like to see then having everything that the side just talked about. I think it's great. I'm all for it. But these small business owners, we're losing in droves. They cannot afford another, basically a tax of some sort. They just can't do it.
So Sanai said, you said it's voluntary, but my understanding is
Voluntary-
everyone in that zone is going to be taxed,
Right.
unless you
So-
have an exemption,
yes.
like you're a residential.
So the
or-
voluntary aspect is what the petition, right? And so you're
Oh, okay,
voting
okay.
to be a part of it or not.
And
It's not the business owner that's voting, it's the property owners that
Okay,
are voting. just
right.
For clarity.
The research that I did many years ago, and there's many of the folks that were in those meetings in the audience years ago as well, I do see the program working if a city is absolutely in financial dire straits, like in a bankruptcy situation where the city can't afford to provide any of the services that they need. That is not where Old Town is. And that's where I see that could be a really issue, but we're nowhere near that. Yes, we have problems, but to put that burden on that small business is really it's gonna be beyond challenging. for
Kevin,
small
you
business.
said to me you talked to some friends
Well,
there
yeah,
who have
because
concerns about.
oftentimes, just the position I'm in terms of being the Alexandria Minority Business Association, I'm looking at things through an equity and inclusion lens. And so, first of all, Old Town isn't an area that's heavily populated with BIPOC businesses, but the ones that are there, some of them have expressed concerns about it, kind of what they were talking about, in terms of just trying to understand what are going to be really the added benefits of the bid, whether it's going to actually help them or not. Some of the things that we've been in talks about is, even though it's not heavily populated, if this does go through, how do we attract other minority business owners to the area, in terms of pop-up shops or things like that, to be able to give people access to, because Old Town obviously is a highly toured area, and being able to have some of those individuals have access to that. But, just from the onset, in terms of when you look at it, it has to, the burden, or I guess the problems with it has to outweigh the benefits. The benefits have to
Right.
outweigh the issues in terms of the added tax.
Yeah,
So what does
I
that
just
do
think
for
it's
it?
also
Yeah.
a fairness thing.
Yeah.
Why is it this side of the street that gets it versus that side of the
Yeah.
street? If we want to do a beautification program and all the things that were mentioned on the panel, it should go to the city council, and it should be part of the budget of the city council and be voted on by the citizens of
Do you mean
Old
for
Town.
all,
Yes.
for all of Old Town, or for?
For, if it's going to be just a section, how do you split that money, and how do you do that fairly? I think that's a problem.
Well, so Sharon, these bids are common around the country, so tell me quickly your thoughts, and Bill, you can weigh in too if you want.
So I understand the cost issue, but many bids are put in place to develop placemaking and to make a place more desirable for people to come into the area. And if you don't do that at some level, and whether it's the bid or the city or whoever does it, then you're losing, and you start losing people to other areas. So what you see are areas that have embraced walkable urban environments and have developed those areas, and a lot of those people, those groups have bids in place to help with bringing in entertainment or beautification in the streets or whatever it is to make it feel like a better place. All of those are really positive things that come out of a bid. How to pay for it, I get the problem. So,
I just wanted to add, so many of you have gone to art on the boulevard or other activities that are hosted by institutions maybe you're not familiar with, and typically those institutions are business organizations. And the biggest challenge that most business associations face is how to be sustainable beyond the maybe initial period. Maybe there's an excitement in the community to have a business organization that represents the interest of small businesses. So that initial period, generating revenue might be easy. But you could talk to many of the business association leaders, both here and others who might be in your district, and you'll find that raising revenue year to year is always a challenge. So a bid responds to that issue by instituting a tax on property owners that guarantees some level of revenue that allow these institutions to plan for activation that Sharon mentioned. And so that's what the positive aspect of a bid, and Troy's points and concerns about raising rent or a burden on small businesses is understandable. But how do we then balance those concerns with making sure that there's a growth and activation within local areas? So finding that balance is always a challenge, but that's what we're trying to strive for at AEDP by giving grants to business associations, but also being supportive of their sustainability goals, which include bids, but not necessarily limited to it.
But if the revenue is being charged to that business, and everything about it is good, but it does nothing for the person that goes out of business. And I don't know how we do that
It's very true.
under the
Always a
current
challenge.
situation. And I think that was the big stumbling block 7 or 8 years ago.
Right.
I have to move on because we're
sorry.
coming up on the, no, it's fine. We come up at 8:30, we're supposed to conclude. So really quickly, enterprise zones. The Virginia state government provides money to support enterprise zones. They're mostly in the southern part of the state in very poor rural areas. Is that possible in Alexandria? Has it ever been proposed? And
I didn't know you all are looking at
anybody,
me.
My
anybody?
understanding is we have a very small, like a footage of where that qualifies for an enterprise zone. I'm so far away from that in time and proximity. But it was just a block or so
But
that
we're considered fairly wealthy.
we do
for
not
most
qualify
enterprise
for
zones.
enterprise zone
So,
funding.
so it's a state-funded program, but the concern is we wouldn't be qualified.
I don't think so.
But it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be called an enterprise zone, but the way the enterprise zone works in those poorer areas of the state, the city of Alexandria, because we do have a great bond rating and we do have fiscal management, is to set up our own type of enterprise zone, call it the Alexandria zone, whatever it is, to work with the local banks and provide that capable loan for businesses that qualify.
So
could go
looking
a
for
long way.
funding locally, not from the state?
Correct.
Okay, okay.
And especially where, business owners who want to buy their building, because the rents are the problem, and they can't, after they buy all their inventory, they pay all their employees. At the end of the day, they don't have enough money saved to buy that building, and so it takes years and years, and by that time, they just give up. Or the rents go up so high that they have to give up, not that they want to give up. So if we were able to have some type of a network in the city of Alexandria, where if a business is succeeding, where we could come together and have the local banks and the local government put up some type of a bond or something that would have the asset held in there, and then the individual store owner buy it. That would keep the small mom and pop in their building versus losing the lease space.
Okay, I have to move on to these questions. There's many, and I'm trying to categorize them. Some of them are equally, they pertain to the similar topics. One, I know none of you are with the city of Alexandria. So there's a lot of concern coming in about the problem with lack of parking. Parking keeps being taken away, and that's impacting businesses. I know it's great for those who are mobile. This is the concern for those older who are not mobile. And those who just, want to drop off kids, or imagine the scenarios where you want to drive up, get somebody out, you go park the car. How is that? Thoughts?
Parking has been a challenging issue for the city of Alexandria. Where did I see a cartoon recently that showed like the founding fathers, and they said, well, what about the parking? So there just is no solution to it. I mean, there's no quick answer to it. It's a challenging. We are a highly desirable old and historic district that people want to come to and people want to live in, and there's very little space. We can't tear any of the old and historic out and build a parking garage. So it's just a conundrum that we have. I don't know the answer to it.
Well, you have 160,000 residents, or a little less than that, but 3 million visitors. I think parking would always be a challenge.
It's an unbelievable challenge for the small business owner. Restaurants where we have the 2-hour parking, you actually have to, if you're having a long-term dinner, I know at Restaurant Eve, people would actually get up and go out and pay the parking meter or move their car so they wouldn't get a ticket. And that, I know when I owned Patrick's, we had a customer say they're not coming back because not only did they have a great time shopping in our place, but then they went to Restaurant Eve to eat, and they got tickets, and they're just not going to do it anymore. And every dollar counts.
Yeah, and I think also it's just for the city to kind of think about some, creative ways of approaching it to be able to kind of benefit those local small business owners who are inside of Old Town and other areas that are kind of, there's those constraints on parking. There's a lot of things, in terms of sometimes you can do in terms of maybe having some sort of, day where people can park or something, like times or something like that, being able to change those things. Although I understand that the parking meters and things like that do benefit revenue for the city, but also I guess you kind of have to
Right.
balance sometimes between
Exactly.
that and also being able to assist those businesses and organizations that may be affected by some of those parking regulations.
So I'm getting questions about the Old Town North Arts District. What is AEDP doing to help that and the Torpedo Factory area?
So I don't know enough about it, but
Okay.
Wynn, who's in the room, does. So please, whoever asked that question, find Wynn and ask him. I know that we, through what I had to mention, the IDA, the Industrial Development Authority, have been able to purchase and use the space within Old Town North and make it available to artists. But that's as far as I know about that project.
So in that area, the overlay will require anybody that's doing new development to put on the first floor of the building something that is contributing to the arts, be it music, arts, whatever it is. So the retail spaces in that particular area will mostly be focused on the arts. So an example is Levine School of Music will go into one of those buildings. It's that kind of situation.
Okay. Someone asked, what percentage of African-American owned businesses are there in Alexandria?
Well, that's one of those things that I think the city was still trying to find out. That's one of the challenges in terms of just the metrics. The city, they've changed some things in terms of when you now register and get a business license and those sort of things. But unfortunately, there isn't a direct answer to that really, and I think that's
one of the first things when I started the Small Business Development Center back in 1996. I thought you could just go to the city and push a button and find out how many small businesses are there. And no jurisdiction, not just Alexandria, no jurisdiction captures businesses by number of employees for their tax data so that you can really, or any of the other demographics, so that you can easily spit out that information. You would think they would, but nobody does.
Yeah, and I was just gonna say, I think, and I agree with you in terms of those challenges, and I think the city is trying to do things in terms of putting certain boxes to be able to identify yourself and things. Obviously, you're not going to get always an exact answer because you can't make anybody check those boxes and things like that. But I think just making those efforts is important to be able to continue in terms of some of the equity and inclusion things. Yes.
Just wanted to add, for anybody who would like to learn more about minority-owned businesses in Northern Virginia, the Community Foundation for North Virginia came out with a report that talks about who is a minority business owner in North Virginia, what are some of their challenges. So that might be insightful to the questions you asked. But percentages I hadn't seen either.
Let's see, these are both for you, Sinai. As a 501c3, how is ADP funded? And then is ADP open to is it subject to the Virginia open government rules? In other words, I guess that would be FOIA requests?
FOIA requests,
Yeah.
yeah. So we are a 501c6 nonprofit that is entirely funded by the city. And so that's a private-public relationship we have with the city. We are, as an independent agency, we're not required under Virginia open access, I don't believe. But our offices are open to anybody. I'm happy to give my card if you have questions. I know Stephanie's always available, our executive director, to meet with community members, and she's always available to also join you in any activities or answer any questions.
Okay. So someone asked generally, to do a comparison with other cities, what they've done to help small businesses, and how can Alexandria look to those other cities?
Let me state that Alexandria is at the forefront of small business. Am I on here? It didn't sound like. I know of no jurisdiction. We have Georgetown's came to me to say, tell us how you do it in Alexandria in terms of small business engagement. We have a city staff are very engaged with small businesses. We have all of the business associations are engaged together, and they work very closely with city staff and with the chamber and with Visit Alexandria and with the associations. All together, this is a very engaged community. We can teach other communities how to do it better with small businesses. Seriously.
I second that, Bill. I tell you, owning a business in Old Town is one of the best things I've ever done. I love Old Town, and those of us who are, everybody on the panel is fighting for small businesses in Old Town, because it's the greatest place to live, in my opinion.
Well, that's a really good note to end on, because we do have to end our program, and it's a hopeful note, and I do want to thank everyone for participating. I thank you for your questions from the audience. I hope everyone's questions were answered, and I'm going to hand this over to Rod, who's going to conclude the evening.
Hey, thank you, Beth. Great job in moderating tonight. The panel was great. I see nobody out here is sleeping, which means he's paid attention, which is great. I was remiss earlier on tonight in my introduction. I forgot to thank our three major sponsors of Alexandria. One is the Simpson Companies, the second is McInerney Associates, and the third is the Zebra. They're stalwarts every year, helping us to stay afloat financially and publicizing what we do. Anyway, I want to thank you all for coming. Think again about March 27th, a month from today. We'll be at the Lyceum talking about how the city's budget gets put together and what you as citizens can do about influencing that process. Thank you all for being here, and here's another hand for our panel tonight. Thank you very much.
This is Agenda Alexandria, a nonpartisan organization that takes a look at the issues without taking sides. Whether it's the city's sewer system, education, public safety, climate change, or perhaps a look back into Alexandria's history, Agenda Alexandria is here to shine a light. What makes the organization so successful is our people. The people who run it, our panelists, our moderators, and of course, our members. Agenda Alexandria is a member-funded organization, and we invite you to become one today by visiting agendaalexandria.org.